Hello and welcome to a very special episode of the Climate Alarm Clock. This episode is in association with Green Foundation Ireland, which aims to create an awareness of the importance of an ecological and sustainable Ireland through education and community projects. We're at Dromineer Quay in County Tipperary on the banks of Lough Derg to record this podcast, and it is going to be an interview with renowned Irish environmentalist Éanna Ní Lamhna as part of the Dromineer Nenagh Literary Festival. So we're here to discuss Éanna's book, The Great Irish Biodiversity Book, which is part of the Great Irish Book series. It's a fantastic read, letting you know about different habitats in Ireland, and is wonderfully illustrated by Barry Falls. So we're about to hop on the QE2 boat here in Dromineer. So next to here, we'll be chatting moored on the shores of Lough Derg to Éanna Ní Lamhna.
We're seeing that.
Hiya, how are you, Mary? Good to see you. You're coming out, are you?
As you look out of the window, straight ahead of you is all County Clare, and slightly to the right is County Galway, and naturally enough behind you is Tipperary.
Welcome again, everyone, to this talk with Éanna Ní Lamhna for the Dromineer Nenagh Literary Festival. So, Éanna, we'll go again. Do you want to you were telling us there, I suppose, about all the books you had before this book, and then the Great Irish Biodiversity.
The Great Irish Biodiversity Book is the one we're talking about today, and it's my 8th book. Most of the books I've written have been for O'Brien Press, and the last one I wrote was called Wild Nature, Wonders of the Wild it was, and it was written for children about wonderful things that people didn't know. And I sold this to Michael O'Brien, the publisher, by asking him about spiders. And I said, where do spiders have their legs? First of all, how many legs have they got? And he knew that. He said 8. And I said, if I drew a picture of a spider with a head and a body, where would I put the legs? And he said, on the body, of course. And I said, that's rubbish. Spiders have all their legs on their heads. Which they do. And this was amazing. And I drew a picture of it, and so it was. So he allowed me then to write this book of the wonders of the wild, of all the things we were told wrong. Squirrels don't hibernate, bats aren't blind, all of those kind of things. And that was great, and it sold very well. So then McGill got in on the act then. McGill are bigger publishers, and they publish with a bigger sales and all of that. So they were doing this Great Irish series. They'd started off about 7 years previously with the Great Irish Weather Book with Joanna Donnelly, because everybody knows about the weather. So this was the science of how the weather worked. And then after that, we had Luke O'Neill doing the Great Irish Science Book, and so on and so forth. So then they thought I could do one as well about wildlife. So they wanted to call it the Great Irish Nature Book. So we had a fight at once. I said, what's nature? What's nature? Nature's not anything. As a good-natured person, a bad-natured person, what's nature? We'll call it the Great Irish Biodiversity Book. And they said nobody would know what biodiversity is. Now, this 2 years ago, when we had a biodiversity crisis declared in the Dáil. We had a citizens' assembly discussing biodiversity. And if people don't know what biodiversity is, it's bloody well time they did. So I said, if you don't call it that, I'm not doing it.
Very good.
So they had 2 choices, so they took the right choice. So we called it the Great Irish Biodiversity Book. Now, and it's flying off the shelves, and I can retire on the money or something. But anyway, then of course the next thing is it a children's book? Is it an adult's book? And it did sicken you. You know, if something is big, the blinking shops put it all over in the children's section. This is not a children's book. Children, of course, can read it and everything else, but if you open any of the pages on it, the writing is not large. The writing on the cover is large, because you have to have large writing on the cover, But the rest of it is the proper size. There's lots of words in every page. There's loads of stuff in it. Just because there's drawings in it rather than photographs, they seem to think it's a children's book. And what happens is people buy it for their grandchildren, because children should have books, and then they all read it themselves. And half the time the poor unfortunate grandchildren don't get it at all. So I hope long may that continue. So it came out last year. It was just in time for the Christmas market last year. And of course it's wonderful in the sense that it doesn't go out of date, like the Great Irish Politics book, which was done by Darragh McCullough. No, not Darragh McCullough. Who did the other one? It was the other man. Darragh McCullough did the farming book.
David McCullough.
David McCullough did that one. Yeah, he's the new rising star in RTE at the moment. But I mean, the politics book has changed since then, obviously, although he has pictures of dead and stuff on it. But anyhow, there you go. Mine is going to be. Well, I think mine is going to be in date forever, but maybe not.
Yeah, and I think, you know what you said, I just echo that in terms of it not just being a children's book. There's so much great information in there, and the illustrations are fantastic. They're great. I know there was a bit of a process, Éanna, with working with the illustrator Barry Falls.
Oh, poor old Barry Falls. He's a wonderfully talented artist. And I said, I like nice pictures, but they have to be right. Do you know how many toes a lizard has? There's a lizard on the front cover, on the second cover, open the page, there's a lizard. Lizards have 5 toes on their front feet. Newts have 4 toes. And people are forever sending me in pictures of things and saying, is this a lizard or a newt? And I said, well, so therefore you have to have the right number of, you must have the feet on display and you must have the right number of toes on it. So the poor man had to take back his pictures and put the right number of toes on the lizard. He had to have the right number of legs on the bees. He had to have the right number of spots on the ladybirds. His heart was broken with me. But he's a nice man. He's still on speaking terms with me. And the book is wonderful because the drawings are all accurate. And if you look at other books and drawings, either the drawings, the important bits are not displayed in the picture or they're plain wrong. Now, there's probably mistakes in this one too, but so far I haven't found any. And he's done a great job on it. So the pictures really make it, because you can talk forever. And if there's nothing, I mean, a picture is worth 1,000 words. So this book could be 40 times larger because the pictures are so great. So I'm delighted with the pictures, and they are scientifically accurate. Yeah.
Yeah, and they really add, I think, to the book very much. So I will just say at this point as well that we'll be talking for another 20 minutes maybe, and then we'll hand over to a Q&A. So if anyone has any questions, you can be thinking of them. So Éanna, the book, it looks at different habitats across Ireland and tells us about the plants, animals, insects, birds, tells us about different things we can keep an eye out for when we're there. I suppose as we're on Lough Derg, as we're on the lake, we might talk a little bit about the lakes and rivers section and talk about the biodiversity here that we're likely to see around here.
Yes, indeed. This is the freshwater lake, as you know, on the Shannon, the biggest one. And already as the boat came along, I'm sure you noticed the cormorant that took off with a great lick when we came over here. You know, we tend to think of cormorants as seabirds, which they are, but the big lakes will have cormorants in them as well because they're fish-eating birds. So you know if you get cormorants that they're really not buying their fish below in super value. There must be fish in the lake if they're here, and if there's fish in the lake, then there's insects for the fish to feed on, and if the insects are here, there must be oxygen in the lake, and so on. And even more so when we didn't see one today, but there are kingfishers here as well, aren't there, Darragh? Yeah. And kingfishers, like when God was making kingfishers, he must have been having the laugh. Because kingfishers feed on fish and they can't swim. So if you're a kingfisher and you have to find a fish to eat, how are you going to do it? I mean, at least the cormorant is diving down and grabbing the fish and coming up again. He's designed for the job. But your kingfisher has to stand on a branch, looking into the water to see, can he see a fish going by? Then he has to leap off the branch, down into the water, grab the fish, get the hell out of there before he drowns, back up onto the perch to eat his fish. I mean, what was God at, designing something like that? And it works very well. But again, he's an even greater indicator of good environmental quality, because not only has there to be fish in the river or in the lake, but there has to be trees upon which he can sit to watch the water going by. Not much good sitting on the new bridge over there at Killaloo, trying to see is there anything going past. You wouldn't get much peace and quiet. So they have to be in places where there's peace and quiet and trees, and that's all a good sign. So by seeing these lovely top predators on your lake, it indicates what the quality is. Then, of course, there's the other ones, then the herbivores, the birds that feed on vegetation. Swans, we saw some of those. We have the grey lag geese, those grey geese that come in, they feed on grasses. We have the mallard duck as well. And I saw somebody, I hope it's not anyone on this boat, arriving down to feed the swans with sliced pans. Do not feed swans sliced pans. We shouldn't be eating them ourselves, God knows, but we shouldn't be pawning them off on the poor birds. People do that. They fire slices of sliced pan, blue mouldy ones half the times. And the swans don't eat them, and they're there, and then the rats eat them, and then the rats are there, and then the rats then eat the birds' eggs, and there's no birds, and people give out about that, instead of saying, we gave the sliced pan too much of it in the first place. I mean, Stephen's Green in Dublin is a real case of that. It used to be the nice birds there, and because of all the sliced pans, there's now rats and seagulls all over the place, and seagulls, when there's not enough sliced pans, help themselves to people's chips and people's croissants while they're still eating them. But whose fault is it? You know, we never put it back to say it's our fault. We shouldn't have done it. We were told not to. We didn't believe it because nobody knows better than us. I'm feeding this with a sliced pan. Now, I was down in Lough there a couple of weeks ago. I'm from there. Everything's perfect in Lough. Although the colours are red and white. But anyway, they have opened a new pond in wildlife, and they have a seed thing, a thing with milled oats and grains and things. You put in your euro, you get your cup of seeds, and you feed those to the birds. This is what they should be eating, and that's working out very well. So when there's a will, there's a way, and when there's the knowledge, people will go with it. But you know, if there's nobody providing you with seeds, you come with your sliced pan. So no sliced pans for the swans. They're grand.
I suppose one of the other big success stories here, or one of the lovely things now, is we were just talking beforehand about the eagles in Mount Shannon here on Lough Derg.
That's a great success story, the white-tailed sea eagles. We had eagles in Ireland up to 1900. We had golden eagles in Donegal, the northern half of the country, and we had the sea eagles in the southern half. And we know this by looking at the place names. I mean, the Irish word for an eagle, depending on which part of the country you're in, is either uller or fioller. There's an F or there's not an F. So you have Ryachanuller, Lananuller, Niadanuller, place names, because the eyries that the eagles would have their nests in would be the same place from year on year on year. So you could put a place name with that. So between persecution from gamekeepers who saw the eagles as eating their prey that they wanted for hunting, and in the end, I think it was the famine above in Donegal, where people had died of hunger, and somebody up on the mountain saw the eagle bringing a human leg back to the nest. I mean, you couldn't blame the eagle, but this was just the last straw. You had died of hunger, and now you were being eaten by an eagle. So he threw a flaming torch into the nest, and that was the end of that particular one. So for 100 years, we had none. So in the year 2000, they decided, first of all, to bring back the golden eagles, Donegal, and then in 2007, they brought back then the sea eagles to Killarney National Park. They flew them into Farran 4. We were doing the Mooney Goes Wild at the time. Terry Flanagan went out to interview the eagles as they arrived. And Jackie Healy-Rae, the local politician, was mounting a protest. And the protest was, you know, he didn't want these eagles arriving in Kerry at all, because them dirty birds ate babies out of their prams the last time. And this is complete rubbish, you know. And of course he was ignored and the eagles were brought in. But there were poisoned carcasses found on land, and the eagles eating the carcasses. Now, golden eagles don't come to dead things, but sea eagles do. And well, in one case, 2 eagles dead beside the carcasses. But the people had said, well, it's my land, but I didn't put it there. Somebody brought that into my land in the middle of the night when I wasn't looking. Could you walk on a Kerry man's farm and he wouldn't know who it was? Anyway, John Gormley was the minister for the environment at the time, and he changed the law to say if something is on your land that's poisonous, you are responsible for it. And that put an end to it. And now down here in this part of the world, people are delighted with the sea eagles. They've spread out from Kerry. They nest over there on the island near Mount Shannon, and people go out in boats to have a look at them. It's good for the tourism industry. People are taking boats, going out, going to the pub afterwards, spending money there, looking at the birds, and the birds then are part of the ecosystem. So those golden eagles in Donegal, and even more so the sea eagles down here, have come back. They're breeding again. They're getting established. A bit slower because obviously the amount of wild food that is around for them now is much less. I mean, they feed on hares and things. Not that much hares above in Donegal. They're still putting out drops for them of food to keep them going. But they're back nonetheless. And it's great to see, because it's easy to make things extinct. Difficult, very difficult to bring them back, because the biodiversity has changed, the habitat has changed, and usually for the worse. So they're good news stories. And I think this eagle was seen recently, was it, flying about?
I saw it for the first time about 2 months ago, towards the end of the summer. Yeah, just flying.
It's the biggest
flying over
bird we have.
Cardiff.
It's
Yeah,
huge.
Amazing. Yeah, unmistakable. Like it couldn't be anything else. I suppose the other side of the good news stories I see in the book, one of the plants that you mentioned in the lake is green algae, and we had a story here in Dromineer a couple of weeks ago about an algal bloom. Do you want to just talk, I suppose, about that as a phenomenon?
This I wouldn't call that a good news story, the algal bloom. We have 60% of this country covered in grassland, and grassland is used to feed the 9 million cows, and no, there's not 9 million cows, 9, but between the sheep and the cows together. So if they're taking all the grass and going off and eating it and turning into meat, well, then the nutrients have to be restored to the land. So therefore nitrogen has to be added to the land to keep the soil going, to keep the grass growing. Now, it has been known to rain in this country from time to time. And if it rains on the field where the nitrogen has been spread, or the slurry, because slurry contains nitrogen and phosphates, and it's not all taken up by the grass growing, it'll wash off into our lakes. So with the amount of rain that we're having now because of climate change, instead of having a grand soft day where your hair went curly, you never get grand soft days anymore. It comes down in stair rods onto the ground, washes away whatever is into the lakes. So that nutrient is then in the lake, and it does what it says on the tin. It makes the stuff grow. So what's the plants in the lake? The plants in the lake are the algae, tiny little unicellular things, but they're plants. So what do plants do? Plants make oxygen. Yay, it's great to have algae in the lake making oxygen. Isn't that great? Yeah, well, it only makes oxygen in the daytime. What does it do at night? It takes in oxygen and gives out carbon dioxide. It's the same as humans, or same as mammals when there's no light. So if the place is full of algae, they have greatly increased in numbers, and it's the dark time, well, they're taking the oxygen out of the water. So you get this algal bloom. There's a reduction in the nitrogen, there's a reduction in the oxygen in the water, and this is not good for all the things that depend on oxygen. So we're seeing algal blooms more and more in our lakes. So algal blooms on lakes like these, they happen on Lough Derg, they happen in bays that are enclosed. But it's not good, because it's an indication of eutrophication of the water. Now, because it rains a lot and the river flows and it'll wash away, it's not a permanent arrangement on the Shannon, the way it might be, say, in an enclosed lake like Lough Neagh or Ladies Island. But nonetheless, it's an indication of a deteriorating quality of the environment with this coming in. So that's what's happening there. But there's a great volume of water in the lake. Now, there is the whole thing about the column of water. How deep is Lough Derg? Now, the deeper the lake, the more oxygen is, the more water there is. So if you want to point the finger at somebody else, it's not our fault for spreading nitrogen on the fields. It's the fault of the ESB in Ardnacrusha taking all the water out of Lough Derg and making it more shallow. They're the one that's causing it. If you drain a pristine lake that has nothing in it, and you'd lower the volume of the water in a pristine lake, it's not suddenly going to burst into an algal bloom. So, I mean, lowering the level of the lake may make less water be in it, but that didn't put the algae there in the first place. So, like, don't allow yourself to be bamboozled by somebody saying, but what about? What about the ESB? What about, whataboutery is a great thing when you're accused of something. Instead of saying, yes, I did it, you say, well, what about them? They're worse. What about them? So, like, don't listen to those kind of arguments. We have to keep Lough Derg as clean as we can, and everything that contributes to the deterioration of the water quality has to be looked at as an item on its own, not what about somebody else.
And I am going to ask now, what about, because there's something in here that I had never heard about in the rivers and lakes sections, what about the Lough monster?
Oh, God, yes.
Which I had never heard of. But
well, this is Lough Derg. Lough Derg is the biggest one, but there's Lough. And if you go over to there, there's a if you go over there's a pub at one place and it has the Lough Shark Room, you see, and this is like so rubbish, what are they talking about, Lough Shark Room? But anyway, I went digging deeper anyway to see what the story was. Now, you can all buy the book and read it yourselves, or, because it's only a paragraph, I could read it for you. The Lough Monster on page 83. In 1960, 3 priests fishing on Lough, one of the lakes in the Shannon, saw a monster swimming not far from where they were. They described it as being over 6 meters long, swimming with its back above the water in a hump, and with a head and neck half a meter long above the water at the front. Now, they didn't get a photograph. Mobile phones hadn't been invented then. Other people crossing the lake have felt bumps and knocks against the bottom of their boats from time to time, but nobody has ever got a photograph of it yet. Why would you spoil a good story with the facts? So Lough has its own monster, the same as Loch Ness, but nobody has ever seen it, except the 3 priests. You wonder what they were drinking. One of them actually did a drawing of it, so this is why we know what it's shaped like, but a drawing of what somebody remembers after a feed of brandy or whatever, God knows. Anyhow, that's the story of the Lough monster, but nobody knows it's not there. Could be there.
Great, thanks, Éanna. And I think, what you've just been speaking about there, the kingfishers, the sea eagles, then the algal bloom, and then the Lough monster, I think that sums up the book quite well in terms of the tone. You can really hear your voice coming through in the book, and I think you're brilliant when you're talking about biodiversity and nature at kind of switching between talking about the wonder and the amazing stuff, talking about the serious issues and the challenges, and having a bit of fun as well. Is that something that you kind of consciously do, or is it just something that comes naturally in terms of getting that balance right between the important messages and the bit of fun?
Well, I suppose it's consciously done in a sense, because if you're not interested in something, you don't care about it. So, if you're not interested in spiders, in fact, you're slightly afraid of them, why would you care if we have none? In fact, wouldn't the world be better off without them? But now, you have to go and look at them now, because I said so, to see are there legs on their head or are their body. I never knew that before. And now you're looking at the wretched thing. And now you have an interest in it, because it's true. If you know those little ones you get in your house, well, we probably don't get them in your houses, which are probably very clean. But in some people's houses, there's ones above at the top with huge long legs. And then there's ones that you lift up the coal scuttle and some huge thing runs away from underneath. So instead of screaming and standing on a chair, you can now look at them and see where their legs are. So you see, if you have an interest in something, if you're aware of it, if you're watching it, then you know it's there. Now, COVID was a terrible thing, but one of the things that happened during COVID was people got out and about and they walked their 2 kilometres. And they were around their area where they were, and the thing went on for ages. It started off with really good weather that first summer, that first spring, as if God was saying, I've sent you all the COVID, but I'll give you the good weather. So we had lovely weather in March and April and May, and then the summer came, the autumn came, and people were seeing the seasons changing where they were, and they were able to see what was growing in their area, what birds were there. Various crowds organised photographic competitions so people could have photographs and stuff. I remember judging one down in Limerick for all the people taking photographs in their 2 kilometres. So people were suddenly becoming aware of what was around. So now if you know something about it, then you might actually care about it. You go out the next time and it's all gone and it was there before. You might care about that. And then if you care about it, you might do something about it. So rather than saying, they're all terrible, you should be doing something, you have to make people want to do it. So how do you make people want to do it? You have to make it interesting. And how do you make something interesting? Make people laugh. Tell them something they didn't know before. It's not a wrong thing. It's not. But when we started off with Mooney all those years ago, before that, scientific programs were very serious, run by men. Well, they're still run by men. I'm still the only woman on that program. But anyway, 30 years later. But they were run by men, and they referred to everything in Latin and spoke to people in Latin about Shinus nigricans or, Turdus marula or whatever it was. And then suddenly along comes the Mooney programme with Derragh presenting it. Now, Derragh, and I say this quite frequently to him, has the attention span of a cricket. Tell me what it does and how it reproduces. I don't want a big long story about in 1947 Harding and Ní Lamhna wrote a paper about such and such. Just tell me, how does it mate? How does it do it? What's going on? And suddenly we were doing a radio programme that people were interested in. Spiders, dragonflies. One dragonfly grabs the other by the scruff of the neck and flies around holding on to her. You'll see them on the lake here, dipping it down, lifting it up. I mean, the woman must have great trust in your man that he'd take her back up again. And now you're looking at the dragonflies the next time now because I said that, and you're interested. And then the male and female are different. The men get all the good colours in the world. The male birds have more colour. The male dragonflies. So your man on top is glorious in blues and oranges and colours, and your poor woman is an old brown yolk being dumped up and down. And now you're looking at this. So this is the thing. So the Moody programme is all about this. And of course, the posh people with this scientific learning were saying this was like the red top newspaper. You couldn't be listening to this at all. But 30 years later, now we're still there. As Richard Collins says, we're forgotten but not gone. We're on a Monday night from 10 until 11. They rejigged the programme the other week, but they didn't put Mooney Goes Wild at some kind of an hour of the day that people could listen to us. But we're still there doing the programme, and people still know us from this, and they know us because we took a light-hearted approach. It was scientifically correct. We never said anything that wasn't right, but we got people to be interested in the thing. And that's the key. And how do you do it? You do it with a light touch, you do it with humour, but it's right. I mean, there's 5 toes on that lizard.
Yeah, exactly. And there are great calls to action kind of throughout the book as well, particularly the section about the garden and giving people tips for making their gardens more wildlife friendly. One of the other things in the book that really struck me, and we were talking about this beforehand, is the dedication you put in at the start. So it's an unusual thing, I think, at a book festival to ask someone to read the dedication. But if you want to just read it and then tell us a bit about that.
Well, I dedicate my books to my children and my grandchildren. And this book had to wait to be published until the last grandchild was born. She was due in August. The publishers were hopping up and down saying, and I said, I can't leave the child out, and they won't tell me the name, and anyway, it wouldn't be right to put the child in. So I had to wait. I would like to dedicate this book to my grandchildren, Archie, Shay, Hugo, Alice, Teddy, Charles, and Tilly. I hope you will get to visit the many wildlife habitats described here, and that all these plants and animals and the places they live in will still be there for you to show to your grandchildren. And I really feel this because in the 50 years that I've been doing stuff since the 1970s, the amount of biodiversity in this country has gone down by 50%. Now, that doesn't mean that half the species became extinct. That means there's fewer swallows, there's hardly any corncrakes. When did you hear a curlew last in July telling you it's going to rain in 5 minutes? Things like this. So this is what I was saying. So in each of the sections in the book, I have a great Irish challenge at the end. So the woodlands, then when you get to page 20, you've learned all about the flowers, you've learned all about the different things. And then on page 20, you have your challenge. So you've got to find a rhinoceros beetle, a beetle that looks like a small version of a huge rhinoceros beetle from the tropics. You've got to find a duck that builds a nest in a tree. You've got to find the smelliest thing in the world, the stinkhorn. You've got to find the Kerry slug, which can escape out of a matchbox that you have closed. So these are all things that are around that I've seen, but they're not common. So this is on your bucket list. This is what you must do from the woodlands. And I have a bucket list for each of the habitats I've done. From the bog, you have to go looking for the red-legged grasshopper. Did you know there's a huge grasshopper with red legs? There's a spider that actually lives in bog pools that can walk on the water. Things like that. Similarly, with the grasslands, there's a great Irish challenge. With the rivers and lakes, there's a great challenge. So that these are jobs that your children, grandchildren, will go on our holidays this year to Glendalough during the breeding season of the goosander, because that's where it breeds, and we'll find it. There's the blinking bird going into a hole in a tree, making a nest. That's all grand. But geese and ducks are herbivores, so they're born ready to go. I mean, not like blackbirds, where Mammy and Daddy come with food for the babies, and eventually they get their feathers and they fly. The little ducks are born like the way hens are. They come out of the egg ready to go, they can walk, and they're up in a tree 20 miles up high. Well, not 20 miles, but they're in a hole in a tree. And then Mammy and Daddy are not coming carrying lumps of sliced pan or anything else to feed them with. So they have to get out of the tree and go off to the lake, jump out, bumpity, 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 bump. You'd wonder what the name of going on. What kind of a mad thing is the goosander duck? And yet this all works. So now you're peaked. We'll go. This will be our adventure for the weekend in April or May or whenever it is. So these are the great Irish nature challenges. Instead of getting on a wretched aeroplane, flying off to the south of Spain, where the temperature is 45 degrees, you can't put your nose outside the door for the fortnight, and you come home like a savage having gone through the airport twice. Wouldn't you have been better off camping in Glendalough looking for a goosander? No, so we just have to change our approach. Kids don't care. Kids will jump in puddles and that'll be a grand holiday. They don't want to be stuck in a wretched place with temperature, and it's getting like that more and more. If it isn't that, the place is flooding. So I'm trying to tell the people in Mayo, because I was doing stuff for Mayo Tourism, to stop apologising from the weather. Come to Mayo and you'll never be stuck inside at 45 degrees centigrade.
And you don't need your passport to get on the QE2 in Lough Derg either. Thanks a million, Éanna. That's great. At this stage, maybe we'll throw it open to questions if there's any questions from the floor or the deck, or I'm not sure what we call it. If there are any questions there. Oh, yeah.
Hello. Hi, Eanna. Thank you.
Put up to your mouth.
Can you hear me now? Yeah. Oh, God. Pressure. No, I just, first of all, listened to the programme and I really admire your work and also your energy. But do you have hope for the future in terms of like the human disconnect from nature and the fact that we don't see the value in, like, that the spider is entitled to put his cobweb in our kitchen? You know, we built the house there, but doesn't mean that they're not, you know, part of the whole diversity, or even that, you know, if there's something in your back garden, a hedgehog, or that, you know, they're just as entitled to have their space as us. You know, that disconnect that humans think we own it all, or have that with all those rights, and animals don't, or animals and insects. What's your thoughts on that? Do you have hope for the future?
Well, we have to have hope. If you don't have hope, you have despair. And if you're overwhelmed by despair, you do nothing. There's no point in doing anything. We'll all be ruined as Hanrahan before the year is out. So I don't go in for despair. I'd much prefer to light the candle than to curse the darkness. So you've all come, you've other things to do on Sunday mornings, yet you're all out here. People are listening to the radio programmes. People want to know what they can do. And if even if there's 7 billion people in the world, one can only do in one's own life what one can. So if you're doing something good, if you're doing something positive, then you are feeling in a better place because you have made an effort, you've tried. So that's all you can do. We can't give Donald Trump a brain operation to make him go back to the Paris Accord, for example. We can't do things like that. But the more we ourselves do things in our own life, it gives example. The more we stop giving out about having windmills, having turbines blocking our view, the more we stop giving out about the wall in Dublin that stops the people driving around Dublin Bay from seeing the actual sea. The wall is there to stop the sea coming in and taking the road away. You know, so the more we stop complaining about the people who are doing something positive, just because it doesn't suit us. We're only one part of this. So this negativity of saying, I don't like the look of such and such, or I don't like that, it's not about you any longer. It's about our place in the world and being positive. So I think there's a huge amount of good to be got out of positivity and going out into woodlands, going out onto the lake. Look how pleasant it is here today. We're sitting here. If I shut up, you could take a listen to the silence and how good that is for our brains, our psyche, are able to relax. I mean, how much nature has to give us. So, like, it doesn't have to justify its place. I mean, if you can't think of a reason why we should have a dandelion in our front lawn, we call it names. We should get rid of it. I mean, that's hate language. Whether you're talking about weeds or whether you're talking about people, it's all the same thing to say that things don't have a right to live. If it's alive, if it's on this earth, it has a right to live. And that's what I think about. But preaching is not good. You have to try and come at it from the other side to make you think, this is making me feel better. This is something that I want to do rather than I have to do. So, like, it's the spoon of honey rather than the vinegar. Isn't that what it is?
I've got a Generation Wild at home to encourage young people into, enjoying the natural world around us. And I just wondered, all my life I've been interested, what in particular sparked your interest in nature and the love of science and what's around us?
I always think that's a very interesting question. People ask me, well, why are you so interested? And I really turn it on people and say, why are you not? I mean, why am I such a weird person because I'm interested in wildlife? Why is that such a strange and remarkable thing? Now, you've been very kind about asking, and you have said you've been always interested in it yourself. But we should assume everybody's interested in it rather than assuming. I mean, sometimes if I'm feeling really nasty and someone says, when did you get interested in wildlife? I say, well, last week when I knew I was doing this interview, I thought I better learn something about it. It's something that we grew up with. I mean, as children, I grew up in the 1950s in County Louth. My mother had 7 children, and I'm so old, there was no television, never mind mobile phones. And your mother said, go out and play, and don't come in unless you're bleeding. None of this business of saying he pushed me and he shoved me and he did this, that, and the other. So we climbed the trees, we went to the river, we knew where the birds' nests were. Outdoors was where we went out and enjoyed ourselves. Now, outdoors is still there. People still have children, they have smaller families, and they won't let them outside the door. You hardly ever see kids out playing by themselves without being supervised by adults. What adult ever said to their child, do climb up that tree? Come down out there, you'll kill yourself. But I mean, if your parents aren't out with you, you climb up the tree, you get down somehow. So there's too much minding on the kids. Let them off. And I mean, health and safety has the country rule now, to be truthful. But I mean, there's insurance problems. We've dug the grave for ourselves by suing, by all of this, so that local authorities can't have people doing things because somebody will sue them and the whole thing will be stopped for everybody else. But it's that approach that for my generation, outdoors was our playground. Outdoor was where we enjoyed ourselves, where we saw things, we learned things, we found out what that particular bird was, we learned the bird songs, and there were no other competing things. Nowadays, there's so many other competing things for children's minds. It's easier to give them screens, it's easier to turn on the television, and you can look at people at the bottom of the sea, David Attenborough, all of those things. And then you go swimming yourself and you hardly see anything and it's pitch dark and you don't see it. And then, because I did television stuff myself and I know this is all contrived, I did a thing called Creature Feature once and we kept all the stuff in the fridge. And you took out the bee and it was absolutely freezing, it could hardly move. So the camera was on the bee and you could close up on it and see its wings and then the bee got really warm and flew away. So you had to grab it and put it back in the fridge again. So you turned over a stone where the cameraman was shining a huge light and you saw all of the wood lice and the centipedes all waving at you and eating their dinner and having sex and doing everything. You turn over a stone in real life and they all run away at once and you see nothing. So you get the wrong impression from looking at television. It's not like that at all. It's all a swizz. So you'd baffle your child to go out and look at something and he turns over a stone, it all runs away. That's no good. He comes back in to look at it on television. So sometimes that's what's wrong. So getting out more is the thing. Buy them a raincoat, buy them welly boots and shove them outside the door and say, come back in when you're hungry.
Thanks. I was very interested actually at the John Creedon talk last night. He was talking about that when he was growing up in Cork and having the freedom of Cork City, and how that was the making of him and how children don't have that. And yeah, children I think are naturally curious, we unlearn it. And it's funny what you said about the health and safety. I heard someone was working in a community group in Dublin and they wanted to put apple trees in the park and the county council said, no, we can't do that, we can't have the apple tree. And they said, why not? And they said, well, someone might eat the apples.
And die.
and that's why they couldn't put it in, because of the health and safety.
What do you think it is, the Garden of Eden? Where the apple trees got Eve into trouble. Yeah. Right, shall I ask you questions now? Well, have you seen anything out the window now? What are all those white things over there? Swans. So these are what kind of swans? These are the mute swans, and we have them over there. Now, they're called mute swans, but they make noise because when you hear them flying, you get this sound of the wind rushing through their feathers, which actually gives a great sound to them. And the male and female swans are interesting in that they both actually pair up and the male defends the nest the whole time. Now, if you're coming back in the next world, from the next world. Like if you're coming back as a bird, don't come back if you're a woman. Don't come back as a mallard duck. The male mallard is a disgrace. He doesn't even form a liaison. Slam, bam, thank you, ma'am, and he's gone. Mrs. is on her own. She has to make the nest. She has to lay the eggs. She has to sit on them for 30 days. She has to bring them around after her while your man is off courting half the parish with his mates. So it's interesting because you would think, well, ducks and swans are kind of the same general arrangement of things because they're that group of things. But the swan is a model of virtue compared to the mallard duck. So you do see mallard ducks jumping on top of females. But the worst thing is, this is what I think is really bad. If I was a mallard, I'd definitely be making arrangements. The male have their lovely feathers, and then they get old and they have to change them. So rather than looking shabby for half the year, changing this feather and that feather, the way the rooks do, you see the rooks with a feather on the ground and the wing and they're growing a new one at the time. The mallards lose all their flight feathers at once, those lovely shiny feathers, and grow them all together. So at the end of July and August, male mallards can't fly, and they have this molting plumage where they put on female clothing, they look like females. And they go around with the women that they were molesting, and the women let them in and say we all go around in a big gang together because there's safety in numbers. Now, if I was a mallard, they could right off of themselves. And they could weather the foxes on their own and they couldn't fly. So I don't know, maybe it's as well. I wouldn't let them in, no. So next time you see the mallards, the males with their shiny heads and they're strutting about, look at them in July and they're a pathetic lot.
Thanks, and just I suppose as we see here, like there's amazing woodland kind of around the edge of the lakes. They've have waterways kind of become kind of bastions at times for bits of wood, for remnants of woodlands that couldn't have been felled at times.
Yeah, this is it. I mean, Ireland at one point was covered in woodland, 85% of the country or thereabouts. And then, like every other European country, agriculture needed its space, so the trees went. But in places where agriculture was never a thing, or there was flooding or what have you, the places have always been wooded. So places like around the lake, while, I mean, I'm not saying these trees are here thousands of years, but the area was a woodland maybe for that length of time. So a lot of our trees in these kind of areas are native deciduous trees. So at this time of the year, they're going to lose their leaves. Now, it's like throwing away your lunchbox. Would you throw away your lunchbox with a lunch in it? No, you'd eat the lunch first. So they lose their leaves, but they don't want to throw them away full of food. So the green in the leaves made by the chlorophyll, that's the food, they take that back into the tree, and then the other colours are left behind. So we see the colours changing now to lovely, whatever the colours were before, lovely xanthan, the yellow colours, the red colours, the orange colours, yellow and black and pale and hectic red. So these are the colours of autumn. And this year has been a particularly good autumn because, you know, it's been warm for a very long time. They're taking the lunch out of the lunch boxes slowly, and there's great colour, particularly in the sycamores, which aren't native, but there's great colours in those beech ones. And this all adds to the glory of the autumn. So we have that wonderful colour around the lake at the moment, because the evergreen trees, they keep their leaves all the year round. They lose them continuously, so they don't lose them all in one fell swoop. So they don't have to make arrangements for the lunch the way that the deciduous ones do. So you get this wonderful autumn colour. So that adds to the visual beauty of the lake. I mean, look up there now and look around. We can see the different colours changing. And that's one of the beauties of autumn. That and the smells, because autumn is the time for mushrooms. So if you're in the woodlands, you can smell the fungi. So you should close your eyes, listen, because when you're not looking, you can hear. And when you're not looking, you can concentrate on smelling. And smell is a sense we don't get half enough value out of. Everybody's putting those trees in their car and some kind of noxious smells, whereas real native smells are great. So woodland smells are great if you don't actually meet a stinkhorn, which is like a sewer was blocked. But the rest of them are fairly decent. So woodlands this time of the year, a treat for the eyes, treat for the ears, and a treat for the nose. So when you're not out in the lake, go walking in the woods.
Great, thanks, Éanna. And we're going to wrap up. I have one more question for you there. In your acknowledgements, yes, you finish off with saying, most of all, you thank your patient husband, John Harding, who fears with some justification that you shall never retire. And so say all of us. Is there what's coming next for you? We can still hear you on Monday nights, and you're still all around.
Well, I have my darling husband here with me. Do you want to make an answer to that? Or will I leave you alone? He wouldn't know what to do if I retired. Actually, I'm here with this book because this is what we agreed. But just last week, I brought out my next book, which is Wild Dublin. It's the wildlife of Dublin City. I didn't bring it down here. You don't want to be bothered with Dublin's wildlife. But the wildlife of Dublin City, I wrote that book in 2007. And then that's 18 years ago, I brought it out again. And amazingly, the wildlife in Dublin City in the last 17 years has improved. I mean, everything disimproves, but not Dublin. The rivers are cleaner. The sewage has all gone down to Ringsend. When I came to Dublin 40, 50 years ago, the joke was, you pull the chain, and in a jiffy, it all ends up in the Liffey. Well, it doesn't end up in the Liffey anymore. The rivers are clean and they're full of otters. I even have an otter on the cover. Otters, yeah, lots of otters there. Because there's no agriculture there. There's no slurries going in. There's no nitrogen going in. There's no sewage going in. The rivers in Dublin are clean, which is, okay, gobdaws might throw in Coke cans and plastic stuff, but that sits on the surface. It doesn't take the oxygen out of the water. So that's something, for example. So that's what I was doing last year. And now, of course, I'm doing the Eye on Nature column, which seems to go on forever because just you've got it done, I've reached the deadline, I've sent it in, but now I have to do next week's one. So that's a continuation as well too. The radio programme, of course, is an ongoing thing as well that has to be prepared for, even though we're on at a ridiculous time, and I get quarter the money I used to get when we were on at a great time. But the show must go on. I don't need the money. Should I have a husband? and then, of course, it's climate. There is everything. Climate Change Week next week. So if there were three of me, we'd all be busy talking about that. Then because I've written books, they asked me to come along and talk at book festivals like this one. And then because I'm supposed to have written children's books, although they're all for everybody, I get invited to children's festivals. So it's one thing after another. Sure, where would you get it? It's great.
Great stuff. And yeah, thanks a million, Éanna, for joining us here in
Anyway,
Dromineer today.
retirement is only for men. Women never retire.
So that's the end of this episode. We're back on dry land here after a lovely spin out on the boat on a lovely calm day, and a great chat to Éanna about the book and about all things biodiversity, nature, and as you've heard, a few other things thrown in for good measure. The book is a really, really lovely book. As Éanna was keen to stress, it's for people of all ages. There's something in there for everyone, and it's lovely to look at. So maybe a Christmas stocking filler for this year. That's it. As always, you can follow the podcast on socials. We're on Instagram, Blue Sky, and Facebook. That's it for this episode, and chat to you soon. This podcast was created with support from Green Foundation Ireland. It was hosted by me, Darragh Wynne, and recorded and produced by Robert Cotter. For more information, see greenfoundationireland.ie or follow them on Facebook at Green Foundation Ireland or on Twitter at GF_IRE.